Hi folks, this is Tony for aminutetomidnight.com. I think this video will shock some people as to what's going on in New Zealand, a clean, green, supposedly, country that prides itself on being a tourist attraction, a destination for hunting and fishing and great scenery, and yet we are seeing widespread drops of 1080 poison in New Zealand, and it's increasing and it's being spread over a wide area.
On the 23rd of February 2017, the Department of Conservation aerially spread 1080 poison bait across 38,000 hectares of the Mount Aspiring National Park and its waterways.
Well, 2 days ago, there was an aerial drop of 1080 poison, and we saw 1080 pellets in the water, and that really scared us because nobody told us they were going to drop it in the water, but it was there. And people were swimming in the river and drinking the water, and what's going to happen to them?
Supposedly to kill the introduced species of mammals that are in New Zealand. For those of you that don't know, New Zealand had no native land mammals apart from some species of bat before the Europeans came here. We've now got all sorts of things: deer, possums, ferrets, stoats, weasels, hedgehogs, you name it, and they were all introduced. There are moves to try and, it appears, take New Zealand back to prehistoric times before those things were here, and it doesn't matter what gets killed in the process of restoring New Zealand to a supposed pristineness of pre-colonisation of humans to these islands in the South Pacific before the arrival of man. Now, granted, there has been a lot of damage by introduced pests to the environment here, but it's like trying to put Pandora back in the box. You can't. And in the meantime, it is doing damage to the very species that they are supposedly saving, and potentially doing damage to humans as well, as we'll see in this video. So stand by, some of it will be shocking, I think, to people in New Zealand and also overseas. So don't switch off if you're not in New Zealand, because this could apply to you wherever you are. Okay folks, now this is important, whether you're in New Zealand or whether you're anywhere else. Before I get into what 1080 is actually doing, I want to show you this. This is an official New Zealand government website, beehive.government.nz, and this was a press release on the 26th of July 2016. New Zealand to be predator-free by 2050. Prime Minister John Key has announced the government has adopted the goal of New Zealand becoming predator-free by 2050. While once the greatest threat to our native wildlife was poaching and deforestation, it is now introduced predators, Mr. Key says. Rats, possums and stoats kill 25 million of our native birds every year and prey on other native species such as lizards along with the rest of our environment. We must do more to protect them. That's why we have adopted this goal. Our ambition is that by 2050, get this, every single part of New Zealand will be completely free of rats, stoats and possums. This is the most ambitious conservation project attempted anywhere in the world, but we believe if we all work together as a country we can achieve it. Now, folks, just think about this for a minute. You live in a town in New Zealand or a big city. Have you ever seen a rat, a stoat or a possum in the city or in your town? If you own a farm, New Zealand is largely a country of farms. Have you ever seen rats, rabbits, stoats, possums? The answer is, of course you have. We all have. We see them all the time. How are they going to eradicate them from all of New Zealand? Are they going to eradicate them from the towns? And how are they going to do that? Think about this for a minute, folks. I'm going to get into more of the implications of this towards the end of the video, but for now I want you to just see what 1080 is and what it does, and just how barbaric this 1080 chemical originally patented by Monsanto actually is.
Pretty fish, isn't he?
New Zealand has some of the best trout fishing in the world.
Every year, thousands of international visitors wade the pristine rivers in search of the freshwater game fish. Large brown trout abound in some backcountry streams, and feisty rainbows reach weights of double figures in many regions.
Can't do better than that. Look at that. That's a stunning fish.
But there's a problem facing New Zealand's fishing, and it's toxic, very toxic. The Department of Conservation uses helicopters to aerially spread the deadly pesticide 1080 poison across New Zealand's forests and streams. The poison is targeted at introduced possums and bush rats, but many other animals, birds and insects are killed, including deer. The poison contaminates the food chain, and in this rare admission, the Department of Conservation is warning fishermen to avoid eating their catch, despite paying for the privilege.
Tonight on 3 News.
Is the 1080 threat to humans proven as DOC issues a don't eat the trout warning 4 days before the season opens?
Anglers are being warned not to eat trout caught in backcountry rivers and streams where 1080 poison has been dropped. Tests carried out by the Department of Conservation have found traces of poison in the fish, providing another hit to our clean green image.
Supposedly the use of 1080 poison is to save our native endangered birds. Well, this article was in the New Zealand Herald in November 2016. 2 dozen endangered kea killed in 1080 poison drops. Drops of the controversial pest possum control poison 1080 have killed at least 2 dozen endangered kea in recent years. And that actually comes from the Department of Conservation, who are the ones responsible for the 1080 drops. The kea is the only alpine parrot that lives in the snow in the world, and it is also believed to be the most intelligent bird in the world too, by the way. And then there's this one in stuff.co.nz from 2015. 1080 drop may have killed rare birds. The Battle for Our Birds campaign may have almost wiped out a population of the very species it aimed to protect in the Kahurangi National Park. The rock wren is an endangered alpine bird. Now here's one from New Zealand ecology.org. Dead birds found after aerial poisoning operations targeting small mammal pests in New Zealand 2003 to 2014. After 15 aerial baiting operations between 2003 and 2014, we found in total 81 bird carcasses, of which 84% were introduced species, mostly blackbirds, and 16% were native species, including the native pigeon and tomtits, and tuis and fantails and silver eyes. And this is from fishingoutdoors.org. Okay, now these are people that are into hunting and fishing. Kiwis killed on Stewart Island by Department of Conservation. Rakiura National Park is located on Stewart Island, which is a small island off south of New Zealand. Our wildlife and native birds are being wantonly killed by the Green Party, Forest and Bird and the Department of Conservation under the guise that they are wanting to eradicate rats, stoats and other pests. This is a lie. The biggest lie ever enacted by Department of Conservation. Their propaganda and lies have been exposed on many social media pages, and complaints have been covered up by the police, district health boards and other agencies. Many staff are too scared to speak up for fear of losing their employment. And in the picture we can see kiwis killed by 1080, and this was not airdropped, this was just placed bait. For those of you outside of New Zealand, particularly in America, who see this, the kiwi is a large native New Zealand flightless bird. It's actually the symbol of New Zealand, and not just a little fruit when you think of kiwi fruit. It's actually a bird. And in this one from scoop.co.nz, was released by Sporting Hunters Outdoor Trust. So again, it is people that are into hunting and fishing. Forest and Bird, currently vehement supporters of aerial 1080 poison drops, have done a complete U-turn over poisons, says a recreational hunters body. Laurie Collins, spokesman for the Sporting Hunters Outdoor Trust, says in the mid-1990s Forest and Bird were publicly expressing grave concerns about 1080 killing bird life. A newspaper cutting from the Rural News July 5, 1993, showed the Forest and Bird Society were deeply concerned at the uncontrolled dropping of 1080 on public lands. The cutting read, "The Forest and Bird Society fears that 1080 poison drops may threaten the survival of the kaka, kakariki, those are parakeets, native bats and the already dwindling kokako. Urgent dock trials at Kapiti Island showed a kaka consumed enough coloured bait to kill it. The Society wants further scientific research done into the effects of 1080 poison drops on native bird life and a ban on the use of 1080 baits in areas inhabited by rare and dwindling species." Laurie Collins said Forest and Bird's strong message on a ban on 1080 was what a growing number of New Zealanders are saying in 2018, but he said the U-turn by the Society to today's blind support of 1080 drops by the Department of Conservation was startling, puzzling and raised questions. What compelled Forest and Bird to change 180 degrees? In this article in the Otago Daily Times, it says 1080 not answer to saving New Zealand's birds. Something you don't expect to find when tramping through pristine native New Zealand forest are carcasses of poisoned animals and native birds lying on the ground, yet this was the experience of trampers in Fiordland following the massive aerial 1080 pest control campaign of August 2014. By the way, Fiordland is one of the most amazing pieces of scenery in the entire world. A group of Glenorchy locals was walking the cable's Greenstone track 2 weeks after the poison drop. As one of them recalls, there were dead birds on the ground. The others were hunters exploring the moat Hokuri Creek near Hollyfoot Valley. Although this was 3 months post 1080, they found deer carcasses, dead possums and native birds on the ground. These people witnessed something deeply disturbing. Our current pest eradication policy has also excited adverse comment internationally. New Zealand actually consumes about 80% of the world's 1080 poison. New Zealand lucky to have 1080 in the fight against predators, says former Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment Jan Wright. Without it, we'd lose the battle, and with it, many of our native species, she told the AM show on Thursday. We are engaged in a battle for the survival of our native species here. It's worth pointing out Forest and Bird are fully behind it. People who know this stuff are behind it. Admittedly, people are concerned. You're dropping poison out of the sky. It makes you uncomfortable. This is not a good thing to be doing, but we don't have a choice. Rubbish. They do have a choice, and they're not listening to the voices of tens of thousands of New Zealanders that don't want this. But as always, it's government that sets the rules, not the people.
Into practically all streams and waterways. The New Zealand manufacturer's 1080 poison warning label states, "Take measures to minimise the chance of baits accidentally entering any body of water," and "harmful to aquatic organisms." When baits hit the water, they are uptaken by freshwater crayfish and other aquatic wildlife. These crustaceans can grow up to 8 centimetres long and form part of the diet of native birds, trout and eels. In this aerial drop, like others, poisonous baits did not accidentally enter the water. The resource consent holder was permitted to drop the poison directly into it.
Drop was yesterday.
Out of the water there.
Let's see. One sec. Yep, go.
So you see that one there? Still nice dark green in the centre though, eh? Even though it's been sitting in water overnight. Another one there, look. Down between the things there.
Yeah, right jammed in.
Wow, that's, how many's that?
The Mount Cook lilies were plentiful and made impressive subjects as we traversed the Poison Valley. The official toxin flight chart shows the poison baits were dropped directly into this river.
Bait there. Oh, yep. Right, the creek again.
all across it and all of the surrounding valley, and it wasn't long before we encountered a young victim.
Oh, it's just dripping now. Look at that. Look at that. That's what's stuck inside. It's just dripping out now. Awful.
It's a shadow there.
Just terrible, terrible way to die too. You know, it's bad enough to kill these little fellas, but the way they die, it's awful.
Stone stuck to it.
Weird how he's actually kind of sitting.
Eyes look right. Oh, bloodshot opening. Open it out a little bit. Oh, just stick there.
Might have died faster than normal.
His eyes blowing out.
Oh, there, look at that. You can see the whole thing is, you know, you go through all this country and you don't see a single live creature.
Well, it's meant to be for rats, and we haven't found a rat yet.
No, nothing.
More deer than rats.
Huh.
Well, there's no rat.
Yeah, no rat, not a single rat. Incredible, and of course you don't see anything live. There's not a chamois or a deer taking off anywhere. Just no sign of life.
The toxin distribution flight chart shows that the poison bait was spread across the entire valley, including this river.
Beautiful, sort of yearling hind, great neck. I mean, you know, there's so few of them as it is, and then they have to go and kill everything. I mean, these just make the place, you know, all this grass is just masses of feed. To have the odd deer dotted around is a wonderful thing. I have to say it's a disgusting activity. And I mean, I've seen these guys, you talk about it, and they actually laugh about this sort of thing, you know? I've heard them laughing when you're talking about the deer it's killing. Yeah, look at the setting, eh?
The official poison bait distribution chart provided by the Department of Conservation shows that only the big valley rivers were buffered from the poison bait. However, all other streams and rivers in the surrounding hills and mountains, the ones trampers and tourists drink from most, had 1080 poison bait dropped directly into them. All streams that form and flow into the buffered rivers were spread with the poison bait.
While politicians and the mainstream media and all the government websites will tell you how wonderful 1080 is and how successful it is being in increasing our native bird population and so forth, and anybody that speaks against that is basically called a tinfoil hat wearer and so forth. But there is a website called 1080science.co.nz which is run by a group of independent scientists, and they have actually produced some excellent information to counter that. And I'll just read one little piece here. The omission of any reference to intensively studied kea mortality in DOC's letter is noted. An average of 12% of marked kea have been reported dead from 1080 poisoning, and range up to 78%. Such figures should cause alarm. 1080 is not only toxic to birds but also bacteria, fungi, plants, nematodes and insects. Irma Review 2007. And further down it says, considerable effort has been made by DOC, that's the Department of Conservation, to show a net benefit of 1080 poisoning to kea through heavily monitored nests and radio telemetry, but none of it stands up to scientific scrutiny.
Well, no one in the world really actually, I don't think the world even knows this is happening.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe Brianna, the Fullerton Informer. We're coming to you live from Fullerton, California.
Helicopters and doing aerial drops all over, like all the native bush and everything, and they're trying to claim that it's to, well, the government is trying to claim that it's to save the native birds, which are actually eating it as well, these pellets that they're dropping.
Okay, folks, they're dropping sodium fluoroacetate all over New Zealand. Most people think New Zealand is virgin territory, folks. New Zealand is under attack right now by sodium fluoroacetate dispersal from the air. And ladies and gentlemen, for those of you, if I haven't mentioned this before, I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a bachelor's degree in biological science from the University of California, Irvine. I understand chemicals. I know how to read scientific write-ups, environmental impact reports. I understand what this stuff is. This stuff is poison, folks. It's killing mammals. And if it can, let me tell you something about possums. They are tough. Okay? A possum is one heck of a tough animal. I've seen them get run over by cars and survive. And they live in storm drains, eat garbage, eat crap. This stuff kills possums. And it's highly water soluble. It's ending up in the rain, in the stream water, and in the groundwater. Okay? This is a very serious problem. So this is a compound. It's commonly referred to as 1080, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I can tell you right now that there are countries that have banned 1080, sodium fluoroacetate. Brazil, Belize, Cuba, Laos, Slovenia, Thailand, and some states in the United States have banned this stuff. And they're spraying it all over New Zealand, folks. That is unbelievable. That is absolutely unbelievable. And you know what we're facing? We're facing a situation here in the United States where they've just released a bunch of invasive mosquitoes, I believe, in Southern California, and they're setting up the same pretext to spray mass populations with pesticides. This is all part of the agenda, ladies and gentlemen. This is all part of the agenda, okay? And what's going on in New Zealand right now, this is not something that's common knowledge to a lot of people. I think a lot of people would be really surprised to find out. And I understand this stuff even kills horses. Is that correct? Have you seen dead horses over there?
I haven't personally seen any of that, but if you type it in on YouTube, 1080 poison, you'll see it. There's people's horses being killed, a lot of dogs being killed, all sorts of things get killed from this stuff. There was even recently in our news, there was an Indian family or something, somewhere in New Zealand, and they'd eaten wild pork, you know, so it'd been hunted from the bush or something, and our media was spinning it off. This family, I think it was like 4 or 5 of them or something, maybe 3 of them, I don't know, but this family ended up paralyzed and in a coma and stuff in the hospital, and the media was telling New Zealanders that this was due to the pork hadn't been cooked properly and it was botulism or something. But a lot of people are saying this is exactly what 1080 would do to people. And I'm not too sure if those people died or not, but...
Wow. So it sounds to me like what we've got going on here is that they're poisoning the food supply in the bush for those of you who are going to be put in a situation where you're not going to have anything to eat because of the economy situation over there.
Yeah.
That's really, really scary. So they're building, you got a bunch of wealthy expats showing up over there, buying up land, building doomsday bunkers. And yet this is going on.
There's a lot of them.
Now, so I know for a fact that this particular compound, the fluoroacetate, the sodium fluoroacetate poisoning, can cause paralysis. Well, I could tell you fluoroacetate poisoning has symptoms, and they have been described to include muscular spasms, myotonic convulsions, muscular weakness, partial paralysis, and respiratory distress. So sounds to me like paralysis and respiratory distress. Sounds like paralyzed and a coma to me. And so this goes all the way back to the 1940s. So what's happening is the animals are picking up large quantities of this stuff, and they are surviving to an extent, but yet getting eaten. And then when the people eat these animals, then it could potentially kill the people. And you know, maybe that's exactly what the intention is over there, is to cleanse the land from the native people for the expats and their doomsday facilities. Maybe they're trying to depopulate New Zealand. Has that occurred to many people there?
Yeah, well,
and it will get into the water supply. Now, they say that it's water soluble, and that is extremely, extremely concerning, because everything we eat, for the most part, that is plant-based is water soluble. And that goes for the mammals as well, because they eat grasses and seeds and such forth. So, and then it gets leached into the soil, And then this stuff obviously can combine with metals and other organic and inorganic compounds in the soil, creating all kinds of side reactions and creating all kinds of other reactive compounds. So this is really a Pandora's box that they're opening down there.
Then the media spins it off that people that, don't want this 1080 being dropped are all crazy and all this kind of stuff, when it's just pure lies and spun by the media. This stuff's deadly. I don't know why they're dropping it all over this country.
Well, I can tell you that they're going to use the excuse to protect the native birds, the blue duck or the New Zealand pigeon or the kaka or the falcon or the South Island robin or the North Island robin. And yet this stuff is highly toxic to birds. And so I don't know how they've managed to make the determination that certain species of native birds are not susceptible to the poisonous and deleterious effects of this sodium fluoroacetate, when in fact it kills birds across the board. So, that's a fallacious argument that they're doing this to protect the birds, because aerial dispersal affects everything. I mean, birds do not just live in a cave. They fly around all day, and they'll sharpen their beaks on a stick, and they'll pick at the dirt, plug a worm, plug a seed, stick their neck in a flower, and all of this stuff is potentially contaminated with this. So what they're doing on its face makes absolutely no sense. So there's got to be a more ulterior, sinister motive to this. And I know that this has been going there for some time, but not on the scale that's going right now. So what you're telling me is this stuff's really been ramped up recently. Is that correct?
There are some people in some sectors of the elite that believe that humans are a blight on the planet, and they would like to see only 500 million of them on this earth. And I'm sure they would like to be one of those 500 million. But is it too much to think that this could be part of a depopulation agenda? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you to mull over. But whatever's going on here, it's not acceptable, and I think public outcry in New Zealand should be heard by those in power, and this 1080 poisoning needs to stop. Data on sodium monofluoroacetate, which was captured from the Nazis after World War II in 1946 by the American Journal of Public Health, found that it killed humans at 5 milligrams per kilo of body weight. It was renamed 1080 in 1956 and was banned from general use in the US in 1972, although the USDA Wildlife Services is allowed to use sheep collars containing it to kill coyotes. It is made by Tull Chemicals in Alabama, and yet, though it's banned through most of the US, they're exporting it to New Zealand and Australia, and our stupid government is buying it. So let's go back to what I mentioned early on in the video. The government's plan for a predator-free 2050. The predator-free 2050 is a plan put forth by the New Zealand government with the goal of eradicating all marsupial and mammalian introduced predators from New Zealand by 2050. And they have some goals, by the way, to 2025, sub-goals within that. Now, how are they going to get rid of every rat from your woodshed, or from the storm drain, or every possum from your orchard or piece of land that you own? Is the government going to somehow force, and the regional councils force everybody into some sort of a program where you have to follow some sort of mammal eradication program? Force everyone into some sort of program to eradicate things on their private land? Or worse, will there be the goal of the creators of the Georgia Guidestones, where there's only 500 million people in the world by 2050? And we know that the elites have been buying up New Zealand, buying large properties in New Zealand, and even building doomsday bunkers. Is there even worse than just controlling everyone to making sure that every individual has some sort of a... I don't know how they would do it. Get rid of every sort of pest and every sort of mammal that doesn't belong in New Zealand by 2050. Or is it even worse, that they depopulate New Zealand so that only those elites are here by 2050? so that their small group of human predators can enjoy a prehistoric New Zealand landscape without the general population here. I don't know, but it's an alarming thought, and we should be taking this seriously and asking, hang on a second, the hard questions. How do the government plan to eradicate every pest from private land and from public land by 2050? I find it really interesting that it doesn't matter which political party is in power in New Zealand, they support the dropping of aerial 1080 poison. We've seen how under the national government they came up with the Pest Eradication by 2050 plan, and under the Labour and Greens New Zealand First Alliance, it's gone basically on steroids. Is it too much to think that this could be part of a depopulation agenda? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you to mull over. But whatever's going on here, it's not acceptable, and I think public outcry in New Zealand should be heard by those in power, and this 1080 poisoning needs to stop. Thank you for listening. There's so much more I could have added, but I think I've gone long enough, so please share this and like the video as well, and donate to A Minute to Midnight if you want to help us. That'd be awesome.